Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be taking a look at Ice Rider Calyrex, another deck that looks very strong post-rotation, loses very little and gains some, loses some bad matchups and doesn't really gain any amazing new good matchups, but there are already some pretty good matchups out there for it. So yeah, losing its two worst matchups is very good for the deck, I think, post-rotation. First of all, make sure you head over to the Potown store where you can soon grab some Evolving Skies PCGO codes. They will be dropping these pretty much on release day from what I understand, so you'll be able to get them as of the day of release, which is great news. You can also use code Omnipoke for an extra 5% off your order, so make sure you do that. Helps us out, helps them out, and you can be playing with these from day one, which is great news. Onto the deck. The basic concept, of course, is Ice Rider's fantastic max lance attack doing 2 for 250, as well as Rider the High King, having sort of variable damage output, but being a great setup attack before you then knock something out with the max lance. Like I say, loses pretty much nothing post-rotation. Luke Metal and ADP going mean that there are going to be far less metal decks around. Even though Zacian still looks very strong, there should be less metal decks around. And because of that, I believe that Ice Rider's matchup spread gets a whole lot better. Suicune is also a new card which provides a bit of extra consistency and is a fairly solid early game attacker, meaning that your Ice Riders aren't in the firing line. Also provides a different weakness, though you are still one-shot by Zacian for what it's worth, so not all that different in terms of the metal matchups at least. And then we've also obviously got Inteleon as well, which keeps things consistent and actually means we can push to one-shots with Leon, which is something that the deck has done here and there before. And we're trying to lean into that a little bit with this build as well. So the deck itself, we've got 4-3 Ice Rider Calyrex line. I mentioned Rider the High King and Max Lance both being fantastic attacks, very strong post-rotation, as they have been pre-rotation. I'm pretty sure a lot of people are very sold on how Calyrex has fit into the meta, and like I say, that metal weakness is definitely looking a little bit better than before, just because there should be naturally a few less Zacian decks around. Zacian is still very, very strong, but it doesn't have things like ADP or Luke Metal backing it up anymore. So yeah, the new card, the new Pokemon in the list is going to be Suicune V with the Swift Runner and Blizzard Rondo ability and attack. Swift Runner lets you draw a card if it's in the active spot. Nothing phenomenal, but one extra card, maybe two if you're able to get the other Suicune into the active spot, can definitely be useful for building your hand size, finding pieces here and there. Obviously, things like Melanie, which is our primary draw, or one of our primary draw supporters in the deck, isn't drawing us huge amounts of cards, so any additional draw is great, along with, obviously, the consistency from the Inteleon engine. And then Blizzard Rondo for 2. Energy does 20, plus 20 for each benched Pokemon. So, if you have a full bench, it's 2 for 120. Again, nothing amazing, but it at least sets up numbers ready for Max Lance, which is great. But if your opponent has a decent sized bench as well, you can be pushing all the way up to 220 damage, which obviously will be one-shotting a lot of Evolving Vs out there. And even if they're limiting their bench a little bit, there's only so much they can do that without compromising their setup. And we can even play things like quick shooting Inteleon, as you can see we are, to push the damage up into that one-shot range on the Evolving Vs anyway. So, yeah, Blizzard Rondo seems like a really good early game tempo attack, and like I say, it leaves your Ice Riders out of the firing line, setting up various VMAXs here and there to be able to just come in and go for Max Lance pretty much as of turn 2. You use Blizzard Rondo turn 2, and then as of later on in the game, turn 3, 4 onwards, you can use Max Lance to be taking KOs, whereas usually it would just be doing 250, and maybe you'd have to use a Rider the High King as well. Consistency-wise, we've got a Crobat and an Eldegoss in here. Still really important to have these cards. Obviously, no Dedenne anymore, so I think we are going to be looking at more... this is going to be a more conventional engine, things like 1 Crobat, 1 Eldegoss, and then some kind of supplementary 1 prize engine. And in this case, we've gone with Inteleons, of course. Keep Calling is great for grabbing in your extra Sobbles out, but it's all about the shady dealings here. Being able to find the consistency pieces is very important, especially when, like I say, things like Melanie don't draw huge amounts of cards. Being able to have that extra supplementary draw is very important. And obviously we've got the one of Inteleon with shady dealings at the top end as well, which is great. And then quick shooting as well, letting us push into, well, one, potentially one-shot ranges, but two, being able to just shore up the damage for things like Blizzard Rondo and even Ride of the High King to be able to take prizes on certain, or hit certain breakpoints in terms of numbers is important. But yeah, really dynamic damage in the deck, as well as a nice early game tempo attacker from Suicune, I think makes Ice Rider's Pokemon lineup look better than ever, which is great. Onto the trainers, we have 4 Quick Ball, 4 Level Ball, and 3 Evo Incense. Pretty consistent stuff. We want to really push to find these Inteleons as early as possible, because they're kind of the backbone of our consistency. So being able to find Drizziles with Level Ball as well as Evo Incense gives us lots of outs to them, which is great. We've then got 2 Air Balloon. Obviously, we want to be moving the Suicunes in and out to draw extra cards, so being able to have them have free retreat means that we don't really have a headache of being able to have to pay retreat. Capacious Bucket is a kind of, well, one of the best ways we have of searching energy right now. Obviously, we want to be discarding them as well, so being able to search them out to then discard them with Quick Ball and stuff like that is great. As well as just not having access to many other stadiums right now, well, many other energy searching options right now. Being able to just have access to energy turn 1 is very important. And then finally, Escape Rope. One, being able to apply pressure from turn 2 with a rope play on maybe your opponent's only evolving V, to be able to just go for a max lance and win pretty much there and then off of tempo is very important. So rope along with boss is great. But 2, just again, another switching out to be able to move in and out of Suicunes to draw extra cards is very nice indeed. Supporter-wise, for me, when it comes to Inteleon engines, I really like playing a wide variety of supporters to be able to grab whichever one you need as and when you need it, and that's why we're playing 6 different supporters. We've got the full 4 Research and Melanie. Research is really important for just getting if you're going first, being able to go Research, attack, well, being able to attach turn 1 and then next turn Research, attach, just digging and drawing is really important. And then Melanie is kind of obviously also supplementary draw, as well as great energy acceleration to be able to chain max lances. Plus energy acceleration in general is going to be really good for this deck, because we can filter out specific pieces with Inteleons and Drizziles, and then having a way of being able to accelerate energy without using by using our supporter, without having to use things like the Drizziles to find stuff, is going to be really good. So yeah, Melanie is obviously never going to be as good as Welder, but definitely still a really key piece to the deck. We have 2 Boss's Orders, again, being able to have an option to apply pressure from turn 2 is very important. Being able to boss up your opponent's only evolving V will win you many games in this meta. Me and Joe have found that out the hard way, unfortunately. So yeah, having access to that. Again, 2 is a fine count because of the Drizziles being able to tutor it out when you need it. So that's completely fine. 1 Marnie, again, our draw support is definitely much more heavily weighted on Research and Melanie. You could maybe drop a Research for a second Marnie if you're really worried about having access to shuffling the deck. I could see that. I think I'd probably play 4 Melanie over 4 Research, but I could see potentially a second Marnie in here. But yeah, being able to have some quote-unquote disruption, as well as just being able to shuffle your hand in at some point is going to be very important. So obviously at least 1 count is, I think, pretty key. But we have things like Eldegoss as well anyway to reuse this. We have 1 Leon, now 250 from Max Lance plus a Leon is 280, plus 2 pings from Inteleons is 220. Sorry, it's 320, which is roughly the amount you need to be doing to be able to one-shot VMAXs, which is great. Unfortunately, the Leon numbers don't work too well with Suicune, but they can work well if your opponent is limiting their bench, because you're kind of soft capped at, they're probably going to have at least 2 bench, but saying they have at most 2 bench, you're capped at 160 with Leon, 190 with Inteleon pings, up to 230, which is still one-shotting those evolving Vs, which is important. So yeah, Leon's use in the deck has kind of always been there, but I think it's still very important, and now Suicune can use it in certain niche situations. And then finally, 1 Birdkeeper. Again, being able to shoot this out is really important, and having an extra switching out that also draws cards that can get you in or out of Suicunes is great. Finally, we've got 9 Waters as well. Obviously, we need plenty of these. Some for the bin for Melanie, some for the deck for Capacious Bucket, some for the hand in the early turns to just get our attachments. So here is the full list. Feel free to pause if you want to see the full 60 altogether. Tech-wise, there's a couple of things you can do really. Essentially, with a lot of these post-rotation decks, you can play almost any of these decks with one of multiple engines. First and foremost, things like the Inteleon engine, but then you've also got things like Cincino and Altaria, which works especially well in the Suicune deck. In fact, you probably wouldn't even play the Cincinos because the Altaria popping a support to the top that lets you then draw it with Suicune is all you need. You don't really need the Cincinos. But yeah, essentially in a lot of these post-rotation decks, you can kind of play any of these kind of core 60 attacking or core 40 odd attacking builds, and then add in an engine like an Inteleon engine, a Cincino engine, a heavier draw engine, things like Crobats instead, and Crickettunes. You can play any of them with any of them, so yeah, keep that in mind. But yeah, a nice 1/1 Altaria isn't a terrible idea, to be honest, to be able to just tutor out. Well, have an extra tutor that you can guarantee a supporter from, so that your Drizziles and Inteleons can be used on more, on other pieces. Scoop Up Net, I think, is definitely a consideration for pretty much any Inteleon deck. Being able to use the Shady Dealings Inteleon and then Scoop Up Net it up and still be able to reuse either Drizzile or evolve it into a quick shooting is very important. Path of the Peak has been played in Ice Rider in the past, and I still think it is very valid. Right now, there's not really any other great stadiums, so I think Path of the Peak is probably one of the best ones, to be honest, and obviously there's not many abilities in this deck. Suicune has an ability, but mid to late game, it's not going to be as useful, and we have Drizziles and Inteleons anyway, so I don't think you mind putting your own Path of the Peak down too much. You can even play things like Pokeboo if you really are worried, and lean into the Scoop Up Nets maybe a little bit more. Finally, Fan of Waves. Fan of Waves is a really interesting one. I think I'm liking it more and more post-rotation, being able to get rid of early game captures, which look to be very strong, as well as things like Rapid Strike energy, Hiding Darkness energy, all of these energy that are going to be flying around. Being able to get back into the game by putting your opponent one attachment behind could be very important. So yeah, definitely one to keep in mind. Really great for, again, Inteleon engines because you can tutor it out exactly when you need it. So yeah, really nice. Also, you can just basically strip out the Inteleon and maybe even the Suicune part of the deck, or maybe even you keep the Suicunes and we just kind of play Umbreon with these attackers. Like I've mentioned multiple times, being able to max Lance on turn 2 is going to be game breaking. It's going to basically push your opponent out of the game in certain situations. So being able to play Umbreon lets you use Melanie as well as Dark Signal on the same, as well as Boss in the form of Dark Signal on the same turn. That could be really important, and I think it's worth considering. I'm sure we will have that build on the channel in the not too near future. In the not too distant future, I should say, not in the not too near. In the not too distant future, we'll have that kind of build, so you can have a look at that as well to see how that looks. But yeah, I think it definitely is potentially very important to be able to punish things like, these evolving Vs, and I think Umbreon builds are going to be the best way to do it, whether it's paired with Ice Rider or any of these other things like Eternatus or Victini. So yeah, I think Umbreon is kind of a completely different deck, but I just wanted to pop it on here to note that you can build this slightly differently. Matchup wise, the matchup spread for Ice Rider I think is very, very solid, to be honest. Obviously Zacian is an issue. Like I say, you're still weak to Metal, and Zacian still looks to be pretty strong. But with ADP and Luke Metal rotating, that's two big variants of Zacian going, and it now looks more towards probably just pure Zacian or Zacian Inteleon, or maybe Zacian Zamazenta, that kind of thing. Everything else on the screen I think is winnable, and I think it's winnable in a fairly comfortable manner. There'll obviously be situations where you go second and the opponent has the dream, stuff like that, but that's the nature of post-rotation by the looks of it. There's nothing we can really do about that. So not factoring that in, I think literally all of these matchups, bar Zacian, are very winnable. And even Zacian, I think, is potentially winnable if you're able to maintain tempo with things like Suicune and only use the VMAX in situations where you really need it. So it's not even the worst of losses to have. But having very solid matchups against most of these other decks is definitely going to, I think, put you in very good stead post-rotation. So some closing thoughts. Like I say, the matchup spread looks better than ever. I think there's one matchup in the top tier that you're really scared about. Everything else seems pretty winnable. Cincino engines, like I said, with Altaria are worth exploring. Maybe you can even just scrap the Cincinos and just play Altaria and Suicune. Obviously, as I mentioned as well, Umbreon can be included for more aggressive builds. It looks like Ice Rider is going to be very, very dynamic post-rotation, and I think all 3 of those builds could realistically see success. So definitely one to play around with. I think it's going to be one that's going to be hitting the top tables a lot, and I think it's worth experimenting with because I think you will see success, to be honest. The matchup spread looks too good to really deny. So yeah, looks good to me. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what your favourite Ice Rider build is post-rotation. And other than that, I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.